Welcome, everyone, to this policy session on February 25th, 2025. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair Roberts. Commissioner Fireside is out of the office today. Roll call online, Commissioner West.
Here.
In the room, Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Chair Roberts.
Here. All right. Thank you, Gary. Would you please introduce the first policy session
Yes,
for
thank
us?
you, Chair. First session today is 2025 Annual Work Program for the Clackamas County Vector Control District. Leading this presentation is Amber Wimsatt, who is the Chair of the Board of Trustees for the Clackamas County Vector Control District. And Chair Amber, would you please introduce your board members here today also, please? Go ahead.
Hi, so when we submitted the paperwork, I just wanted to make a quick correction. I'm no longer the chair of the board. I resigned from that position on the 11th of February. I am now serving as the interim executive director for Clackamas County Vector Control District. With us today is Lowell Hanna, our treasurer, Dan Green, our secretary, and we also have our office manager, Teresa McAuliffe, here with us.
Great. Thank you all for coming.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm sorry, is there a place that I see that you have the slides that's gonna come up there? Okay, I just want to double check. All right, so this is our overview is, excuse me, sorry. Today we'll be going over the West Nile update, the invasive species update, our plans for 2025, and then any other closing remarks that we may have. I already corrected the introductions. We have, those are all updated other than that. So moving on, our vision statement is to progress towards a future free of vector-borne disease using all the scientific and educational tools available. The mission of Clackamas County Vector Control is to manage public health vectors within Clackamas County using an environmentally friendly approach. We aim to limit the number of mosquitoes and flies that could potentially cause any annoyance or vector-borne diseases to the members of Clackamas County. Our core values are service, professionalism, integrity, respect, individual accountability, and trust, just as with the rest of Clackamas County. We are under ORS 452 for our tax revenue. We have two different types, excuse me. We have the permanent levy, which is 0.0065 per 1,000 assessed property value. And we are in year one of our local option levy, which is 0.025 per $1,000 of assessed property value. And that new levy will expire in 2030. So some highlights from last year, 2024. Our budget expenditures were right around that $1,198,000. We had it says 4 full-time positions, but we had 3 full-time positions, 1 seasonal assistant biologist, and then we had a part of that 10 seasonal employees, I'm assuming is considering the biologist in there with it, but we had the additional seasonal field technicians that come on every April approximately. We had 20 vehicles, 2 of which are equipped for spraying. We've been working with our fleet a little bit back and forth, and we did recently just put 4 up for auction through the county. And it looks like we had around 539 citizen requests for services. There was a total of 7,331 mosquito treatments for both larval and adult mosquitoes. That broke down further. We had 19,873 mosquito samples for larval form. And for the adult form of the mosquitoes, we had 1,784 samples that we looked at and identified. We also distributed 771 of the Gambusia mosquito-eating fish to citizens of Clackamas County. The next slide, we go a little bit over our West Nile virus. The picture presented there is of the bird mosquito transmission cycle. So the humans and horses are both a dead-end host. We don't actually perpetuate the spread of that disease, but the birds are ones that the mosquitoes can bite and transmit the disease. Culex species are the most common vector of West Nile in Oregon. And as far as disease ecology goes, temperature, humidity, and proximity of other species also influence numbers in Oregon. And if you can see the bottom right-hand corner there, it kind of shows where more towards southern and the eastern side of the state is where West Nile is typically detected. And that was for 2024, the updated map. So along with the Culex species of mosquitoes, we also can encounter a couple of different Aedes species of mosquitoes that are invasive. They have made their way into the different areas of counties in Oregon up from California. Aedes aegypti and Aedes allopictus are the two pictured here. They tend to be urban dwelling mosquitoes that feed primarily on humans. They especially like to feed on the ankles, wrists, and elbows. Both species are known to lay their eggs in small water sources. This would be like cups or bottle caps or any other small vessels or pieces of plastic that may be lying around. Eggs are able to survive on the surface for a long period of time, and they hatch when a container thus fills up with water. This is really important to know because not only are they a major annoyance, but they are also a public health threat. These mosquitoes are mosquitoes that can spread viruses like Zika, dengue, and chikungunya. I'm not 100%, excuse my pronunciation of that. I'm sure I butchered it. But moving on the next slide, we do have a picture for the year 2024 for West Nile activity in California. The blue areas are areas where there was numbers of human cases, and in the couple of green areas, it was detected, but it was not detected in humans at all. The next slide goes on about some of the preventative measures and the protection that we can protect ourselves from with mosquitoes around our home. Major part of what we do is public outreach, and we try to spread that eliminating breeding sites is one of the major ways that citizens of Clackamas County can help in their own homes with mosquito problems. It's recommended that every week that containers are dumped if they're holding any standing water, rain gutters being free of debris. Decorative fountains should either be drained well or remain optional, since mosquitoes in more turbulent waters have a harder time breathing. So keeping the water flowing and not stagnant helps a lot with that. Changing animal and watering dishes, and making sure that the drain pipes are not clogged. Ways that community members can protect themselves is by wearing long sleeve clothing and pants outdoors. Make sure that screens are functioning and don't have holes in them around their homes. And of course, there's various different types of insect repellents on the market. DEET is one of them, for example, and there's also some different essential oils that can be used to help mitigate mosquito control as well, or mosquito bites. So moving into 2025, we have some new opportunities. We are hoping to start with our remodel soon. We will be working to get the ground broke with that and move forward with that process. We're also continuing our public outreach, and that picture in the bottom right-hand corner is of one of the educational games that we had designed, and we still are doing library and school programs. Rick Reynolds has still been very much involved with that, and then as far PacWest also helps us with our Facebook and our media as well. And that's pretty much all I have for my presentation on that. Is there any questions about anything that I went over in that section of it?
I don't see any questions on that section. You go ahead and continue.
Okay.
Thanks.
So let's see here. So in the matter of accepting the 2024 annual report and the 2025 annual work program for Clackamas County Vector Control District, this is pursuant to ORS 452.120. It is required that we furnish to you by February of each year the proposed annual work program. In that work program is an estimate of funds required for the next year's budget. It has a description of our work completed, the methods to be employed by the district. We have spoke with the board along with the district officers to approve the annual work plan. Let's see. Okay, so it's by recommendation of the Board of Clackamas County Vector Control District that we move to approve the 2025 annual work program and the 2024 annual report.
Right. Turning to my colleagues, questions? Anybody have any questions? Yeah, I maybe have one, and I'm looking, just trying to understand better kind of this financial picture here.
Yeah.
And maybe you could go over those, because, and perhaps I'm adding the numbers up wrong, but some of them that I kind of had some concerns about it, whether or not they were all matching. So I see you have listed on there your 2025 work plan at 6.3 million, right? And then you also have your collections are at just a little over 2 million. And so kind of talking about, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit about the expenditures and kind of how you're covering that other part, just so I can better understand it.
Yeah, so there's been a savings plan in place that we've, any of the money left over from our budget each year gets rolled over, and then we have an annual allocated amount that we move into the other accounts, and that's been in the process of, it's left over from when we bought the building, because we're now in the old Oregon City Police Building off of Warner Milne. So we're, that's been stuff over, I believe, approximately the past 20 some odd years that we've been working on saving towards. So a lot of those higher expenses this year are going to be going into that process of starting that remodel.
Okay. And so your collections, though, are estimated at a little over 2 million then? Is that right? And when I kind of see down here,
I
Having to
believe
do with
so,
your-
but it has been a little bit since I looked at that. Let's see here. Yes, to the best of my knowledge, that is the correct number on that. I believe we pulled that from what we're expecting to get between the standard tax rate and the levy that we're in the first year of.
right. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Seeing none, colleagues, anyone wishing to make a motion?
Sure. I move we accept the Vector Control District's 2024 annual report and the 2025 annual work plan as submitted.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you both. So Commissioner Savas has moved to accept the Vector Control District 2024 annual plan and the 2025 annual work plan as submitted, and Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please call the poll?
Commissioner West. Commissioner West, are you online, able to hear us?
You're muted, Commissioner. Okay, go on.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Mr. Chair,
Aye.
motion passes 3-0, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. And Gary, what's up next? And I want to, before we shift to the next item, I just wanted to just say thank you. I think it's very important, work that you do. And as an individual that lives in an area where there's lots of mosquitoes, I appreciate the work you do. And you're right, I know exactly where they bite on the legs, as you mentioned. So I've been one of those victims. So I think it's very important work, and keep up the great job. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you guys.
Right. And Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to the Board of the Vector Control for being here today. Your next policy session is Strategic Investment Fund, Community Road Fund, Plan Approval. The team from Transportation and Development will present. Dan Johnson, the Director, and Mike Besner, the Assistant Director.
Signalized intersection there.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, good morning, Chair. Commissioners, thanks so much. Again, my name is Dan Johnson, Director for the Department of Transportation and Development. I'm joined by Mike Mesler, our Assistant Director for Transportation. We are here to share with you something we haven't talked a lot about with you, but it is important to the work that we do. Essentially, back in 2019, the Board of County Commissioners approved the first ever countywide vehicle registration fee. Those dollars, those revenues that come in now currently are then placed within our Community Road Fund. And as a part of that, approximately about $11.5 million a year is collected. And that kind of equalizes us, if you recall the discussion at the time, with a lot of the adjoining counties, Multnomah and Washington more specifically. Not necessarily catching up to Washington County with some of the funding they have in place, but it does create more of an equal playing field amongst all the three urban counties in the metropolitan region. It's important to understand the fact that though we collect that $11.5 million annually, by statute, 60% of that goes to the county, 40% is distributed to the cities by population. Those ranges, basically for the three largest cities, from $500,000 to $700,000 a year, generally speaking. During development and adoption of this particular fee, the board had interest and a desire for the county to basically set aside a portion of our 60% for what we termed as the Strategic Investment Fund. And this was a fund that we had focused on being used for jointly agreeable projects by the counties and the cities, either one that fall into road transfers, so essentially the transfer of county roads within cities' boundaries, number one, and or two, projects that were maybe on the fringe or that are mutually beneficial to the county and the city. And so when this was adopted, we essentially looked to vet a list through our discussions with our Clackamas Coordinating Committee, C4. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike here to run through the prior list, just so you kind of have an idea of work done to date. And then secondly, talk about the discussion we just had recently with C4 to revise that list and update that list going forward for the next couple of years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay, thanks. So you have there's a couple attachments. Attachment A is the one that shows basically the original plan and what's happened in the last 5 or so years. So jurisdictional transfer with Canby, we didn't transfer all the roads in the original plan, but we did transfer a good portion of them, about 840,000 worth. Estacada, we did a jurisdictional transfer with that wasn't in the original plan, but it came up and the money was there. City of Sandy, we completed the capital project of adding paved shoulders on 362nd, just outside the city boundary. And Wilsonville, we did a partial road transfer from the original plan as well. In progress right now, we are designing a project at Deuce Road and Eagle Creek Road, just outside of Estacada. We also did a small road transfer with them, but that project is I believe, slated for next year's construction, 2026. One thing I do want to mention that the dollars on here are only dollars coming out of the Strategic Investment Fund. In some cases, we're leveraging. So the Estacada project, we're actually leveraging system development charges, which are fees paid by developers based on their impact to the transportation infrastructure. And SDCs historically can only pay for a small portion of a project, so it's a good use of them to leverage the community road fund dollars. Lake Oswego, we're going back and forth on a road transfer right now. Malala, we're designing a replacement of the Bear Creek Bridge there on Malala Avenue. It floods pretty often, and we're going to have a small jurisdictional transfer as part of that as well. Oregon City, the big one right now is Beaver Creek Road. We have a staff-to-staff tentative agreement. So you're going to see that probably coming to you for board approval in the next few months. And that's a big one. And then a few of them did not move forward from the original plan, mostly due to cities declining the road transfer at a later date. Gladstone, Happy Valley, the city of Milwaukee, all decided they didn't want to do the road transfers. Tualatin's was a multi-use path along Borland Road, connecting the city to the Rolling Hills Church. Unfortunately, that project scope was a little bit more expensive than we originally thought, and it just wasn't realistic for this funding source that only raises about $1 million a year. And then West Lynn, we didn't know at the time, West Lynn doesn't have any county roads in their jurisdiction, and there wasn't really a project, but we put in the outer years in the plan, hey, we'll just put a number out here. But nothing ever got identified, and so nothing moved forward. So that's looking at a little of the past and present. And then the other attachment, which is attachment B, is a version of what presented to C4 a couple weeks ago. This is very fluid and changes, so it's already changed a little bit. We got a little bit of feedback at C4. I tried to incorporate it a little bit. Canby I am talking with Canby staff. It's still staff to staff about a transfer of Pine. There is a chance that'll happen between now and the end of this fiscal year. The Estacada project that we just talked about is there. I'll come back to the Gladstone. Happy Valley, that transfer, we are talking about a new one. It might get pushed back a year to 25-26. Lake Oswego, I mentioned we're still talking. Milwaukee, we've discussed a Lake Harmony Railroad Avenue intersection study. You probably are all familiar with that intersection. It has major challenges. A project to fix it would be tens and tens of millions of dollars, but you got to start somewhere. So that was the thinking there. The Malala project, already talked about, it's ongoing. Just mentioned Beaver Creek Road. River Grove, there's a rapid flashing beacon at Dawn and Pilkington that has been requested that our staff believes is a very good idea. And this is, again, it's county roads, county intersections, but adjoining a city. So we programmed that in. In talks with Sandy about a small jurisdictional transfer of part of Ten Eyck Road. Tualatin, rather than that Borland project, and they were not the ones who said, no, we don't want to do it. It just, the cost became too much. So instead, we've talked about 65th, which is the road on the western edge of our county. We actually share it with Washington County. Tualatin's planning a project there at Borland and Sager in 65th to help traffic flow better. We said, hey, how about instead we contribute towards that project, and when we're done, you guys take a jurisdictional transfer of our portion of 65th. So that's the thinking there, and those conversations are ongoing. Wilsonville, a small transfer. And then Westland and Gladstone, I still have just the to be determined because I really don't have anything, but I don't want to leave them out. So I've put them towards the back of the 5-year plan. And this is it's almost the same thing that got presented to C4. It was a small tweak or two as dollars change. So.
Real quick, just so we remind the board, I mean, this is a plan, it's a living document. There's small modifications. We work in concert with the cities on where there are opportunities. We look to leverage money wherever we can. Keep in mind, though, all board transfers are acted on. We bring them in front of you. So the final dollar amount will be reviewed and approved by you, the Board of County Commissioners, number one. Number two, if we do a project, and if it's a project that we lead, that contract will come in front of the board for final approval. If it is an agreement we have with the city to look to leverage dollars or provide funding for them to do a project, That is done through an IGA. That will come in front of the board for final approval. So you look at this living document, there are additional actions, and any and all actions regarding these projects will come before you in some form or another regarding the spending of the funds. So, Mike and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have right now.
Commissioner Savas, go ahead.
Chair Roberts, members, Commissioner West, Commissioner Schrader, just give a little bit of history on this so I can explain at least where Paul feels about this fund and some of the challenges. So years back, 2011, 2012, a conversation began at C4. Gary was the PGA director at the time, and he knows this conversation pretty well. And we were trying to figure out a way to deal with some of the capacity challenges we all have in regards to a growing Clackamas County, not having a lot of resources like Washington County has with their MSTIP funds, not a lot of fungible monies. And so we embarked on exploring a few things, a few different mechanisms to adopt and working with our city partners. And long story short, things happened. 2013 and 14, there was a little bit of an upset, then change of leadership, and suddenly what we have is we have what we have here today as a result of that effort, but not quite formulaically was my issue with this. I ultimately voted against the vehicle registration fee, not because I was against the overall purpose of it, but really the formulaic aspect of what these funds here in particular, the strategic investment funds, right, of this, which is about $1 million a year. And I felt that really, because this was a city kind of a partnership and state law says basically that vehicle registration fees are split 60-40, that we were taking our 10% and building on this city investment, if you will, as opposed to 5 and 5, right, where it could have been the city's investing 5 of their percent, 45%, and 5 of our percent. So we would have a collective 10%, same amount of money, but do the same thing, but we all have skin in the game. That was my rub. And now that may not sound really all that significant or important, but what's come to light, as staff outlined, is that 3 cities have chose not to do jurisdictional transfers because it turns out that their rationale is basically they don't have to take care of it. If it remains the county, then the county will forever have the maintenance costs of that, which defeats the purpose of this 10% commitment to some degree. It's not exclusively to that. You know, I can see where we can program this out, yes, you know, I shared, this is just Paul, this is not the board, I wasn't speaking for the board then, not speaking for the board now, I'm just speaking as Paul, knowing that our needs are huge, and knowing that the unincorporated areas are just as much challenge as they ever have been, and we are, as cities grow, whether it's Lake Oswego or West Lynn or Wilsonville or Estacada, our nearby rural roads that are Clackamas owned are not really getting transportation SDCs that the city collects because of that. So long story short, I think we find ourselves somewhat underfunded. So I would like to see this phase out a little bit and phase into, you know, at least maybe 5% and be reduced so that we can kind of gain back our half of our monies so we can put them towards other priorities in the county, which seems only fair. But that's just a suggestion, and that's not what's on the table today. That's not what I'm suggesting we discuss today, but I just thought I would just let you know this is just a concern I have. I'll leave it there. Happy to at least share any more details if you're so interested.
Great. Commissioner West has a comment.
Commissioner West, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, sorry, not a comment. I just want to do a quick sound check. I was having some audio difficulty during the meeting here, and can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. I think we're through it, but thanks for giving me a second to do a sound check. I'm here.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Just a question for Commissioner Savas. So you're not suggesting now that we change it, but is this something you would like to see as an issue or work session in the future? I mean,
Well, Mike, you were there for the discussion, and you're here for this discussion. And you've obviously had follow-up discussions with some of the city staff, not the electeds per se. Just like to hear your thoughts on the latter part of this discussion.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'll just say staff to staff, we actually get along with and work pretty well with, I'll just say all our cities. And, you know, there's a lot more going on than just this fund with them, and so there's a lot of give and take. We're always talking about all kinds of different things. Yeah, some of them declined the road transfer. But having said that, other cities stepped up, and we increased the proportion of road transfers to them. Estacade is a good example. Oregon City is a good example. We've transferred one road that wasn't on the original list. And so, you know, for any of the cities that have said, hey, we're not interested anymore, there's been another one to say, hey, if anyone says they're not interested, we are. And so we're still transferring roads. So the original intent is, I think, being met. We're not completely getting out of the county road in city business, that's for sure. And as you've pointed out, legally, we can't make them. A city has to vote, just like you guys have to vote to give a road up. I will also say to change the 60-40%, or 50-10-40 as we've made it, we can't do that without permission from all the cities. We would need an IGA with them all because state statute says it will be 60-40 unless otherwise agreed upon. So I think that'll be an effort. But, you know, for $1 million a year, and by the way, as a reminder, it's not all the whole community road fund that the county has. You know, we are doing big projects with this money that are county projects, and in some cases next to cities. Stafford Childs is a prime example. We just opened bids on it. We had 9 bidders and $10 million. So we're doing big things with the money. But for a small fund, I think we're stretching it pretty far. So I don't know if I've addressed exactly what you've said, but I think we are meeting most of the intent of what the Board of Commissioners had when they created it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mike. And back to Commissioner Schrader's question she posed. And you're right, Mike, thanks for bringing up what the law allows. I'm not suggesting that we can't control what the cities do with their 40%, right? They can volunteer their 5% voluntarily towards these programs or not. But we can do everything, we have everything in our power to do with our 10%, right? Or 5%. We could take the 10% back entirely or the 5%. And it seems to me that once the road transfer aspect is, I guess, expired or basically served its purpose and there's no more roads to transfer, to me, it seems that we ought to bring that 5% back towards other investments in the county because we are woefully underfunded. I mean, I don't think you'll disagree with that, right? We have huge needs and we have very little funding. So it might only be $500,000 at 5%, but it's still something that can help. And so that's what I'm talking about. Again, not for action today, but I just think that we ought to be, as we phase this out, again, phasing out the road transfer aspect of this, we have full control of our 10%.
And that's definitely true. And it would require changing, I'd have to look at the ordinance again because the vehicle registration fee was created via ordinance. It's in the county code. I believe that the strategic investment fund is addressed in there, so it would require an ordinance to amend county code.
Yep. And I might just let the chair know and anyone else in the audience who wasn't here at that time that part of the controversy during and after that was that it was not put before a vote of the people. So I'm not advocating for that, not suggesting we do that. All I'm saying is that this was a very controversial issue that haunted us for a long time. So I find it very disappointing that some of the roads aren't being transferred and the expense of one road in particular for here forward is in the millions and millions of dollars every time we have to do another lift.
It
and
is.
All the sidewalk improvements and all of the other things that go along with
Right.
it.
Yep.
I also want to respond to that because that's a good point. I mean, the fact that one of the single biggest concerns, in fact, the only real concern that we heard of, was around the rate per trailers. And we went forward, went through our committee, went through C4, went through the Board of County Commissioners, and adjusted that rate down substantially. And so, and since we've done that modification, we haven't heard a lot of concerns around the rate, beyond the fact that there were certain people who wanted to have a vote in the discussion. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. But we did respond to some of the near-term and most audible concerns we heard from our citizens regarding the trailer registration.
Yep. And that did help, but I have to always balance that with the people, and you hear from them too. You know, the people that are squawking because we can't pave the roads.
Yeah.
And they've been paying and paying and paying. They might have lived there for 40 years or 60 years, and the road still hasn't been paved. And so this 5% might not seem like a lot, but it'd sure be nice to at least help in some of those areas, knowing we're cash constrained.
And I guess also just to remind everyone, I mean, that we went out to the community as a part of that effort, and it was, so the rest of the money, we're not talking about this set aside in the strategic investment fund, but we're talking about the other dollars that we're using in that community road fund are around three primary areas, one of which is congestion relief. That was heard from the citizens of Clackamas County. That was a priority, that number one priority we had from them. Number two was safety, so they're targeted towards certain safety improvements. And number three was a desire to ensure we had a local paving package. Because until the approval of this funding stream, we were having to prioritize the funding program, the paving programs that we had on our larger arterial roads, and we were not doing any localized paving of our local and more community-facing roadways that are in the neighborhoods, which have been revised, and now we're adding those back to our projects.
Great, thank you. Commissioner West, do you have a comment?
I do. This is so interesting to me. I remember as a Wilsonville city councilor when this was a hot topic. I was a brand new city councilor, and one of my first votes was for the city of Wilsonville to take a position on this. It's always wild to see these things come full circle again. I am just curious. So it was controversial. I remember that I was on a steep learning curve as a brand new elected official at the city level. And I guess my question revolves I think some of the controversy may have kind of subsided at this point. A lot has changed since that has passed and we've been receiving these funds. I think we've been doing a good job with them, but Commissioner Schrader, I think you bring up maybe a good question, maybe for all of us to ponder is it time to do some type of reassessment? Is this tax keeping up with the legitimate increase of inflation and the cost of doing everything? How sustainable is it at this current rate? Do we know anything now do we know anything new now that we didn't know then that might be a smart way to adjust or tweak this to make it kind of be more efficient, to work better? And I don't know. I think that when do we reevaluate this, assess it, see how it's been doing, and then potentially be open to pragmatic and sensible changes to it? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Dan, about doing something like that?
As of right now, my assumption or my recommendation would be to kind of wait and see what comes out of the long session, right, in regards to transportation funding. There's a lot of discussions down at the state, and we're tracking all of that. And then once, if anything materializes out of that, assess that, and then include some future discussion regarding this particular funding measure going forward. Yeah.
One thing I'd add also is, and I completely agree with that, because the numbers the legislature's talking about, some of them are quite large. But we're also about to embark on a new transportation system plan for Clackamas County, and it's a pretty major undertaking, and our entire project list, and that will go through the board as well for adoption, but our entire project list is probably going to get changed in some manner. And so that could feed really well into what the future of this fund could be and what investments that we'd want to make.
Really quick follow-up. What is the, once we get, I think that's sound advice. What is the process if we were to start to kind of maybe keep this in the back of our minds as a possibility to revisit this and to do better with it? Can you tell us a little bit what that process would look like?
So let's start with the TSP really quick. And so essentially, when we come back and look at an update to our transportation system plan, one of the things that we implemented, historically, that document essentially outlined a certain number of projects that were needed to support our infrastructure system around Clackamas County. One of the great things that staff has done was to apply kind of a tiering system to that transportation system plan. And that, please correct me if I'm wrong here, Mike, because I'm probably going to forget this, but for example, we have tier 1 projects that we know are viable for funding and or very highly compatible for funding. We have tier 2 and then tier 3 that are more challenging to fund. So I think the discussion around the funding starts with the dialogue, with the adoption and the prioritization of projects around that transportation system plan. And then looking at, if the board has the appetite, and then looking at seeing what comes out of the long session. And then on top of that, having a dialogue with the Board of County Commissioners around what their interest is and what their appetite is for other funding sources if they're out there. We have, if you remember, when we went back and looked at this, there aren't a lot that we can do. There aren't a lot of tools that we locally have to raise local money. But there are more than this one. So for example, our partners to the north actually raised their vehicle registration rate fee higher. And they've assigned a certain type of use of those funds. I believe they're directed solely towards the bridges in Multnomah County. Washington County has other funding sources. Some we cannot get. The MSTIP we cannot get because it's in their permanent tax rate. But they have a road district, and we can talk to the board about their interest and desire in kind of moving forward with kind of a public discussion around those tools once that TSP is adopted and once we know more from the long session.
Yeah, and also procedurally, I just pulled up the code here. The county code does say exactly how this money can be used, and it does talk about local road maintenance, safety-related projects, and capital focused on the reduction of congestion. It also specifically says 10% will be used in this fund. So in the end, we would go through the process, probably, as Dan mentioned, if we wanted to make a change, it would involve policy sessions and then amending the county code.
Thank you for answering my questions.
All right. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I don't have much more to say other than I want to just probably make a point a little bit differently. And thanks for bringing up the transportation package. It was a reminder because when HB 2017 passed, it triggered another spawn when people registered their cars and they saw that the registration went up. And, some people related it back to the decision we made. Some people realized maybe it didn't, but still it's going up and up and up. And if the transportation package raises the vehicle registration fee again, it'll just add to the fervor that's already out there. So I would say that the call I took a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whichever, was related to someone who lives in unincorporated Clackamas County, about 2 miles from where I live, who said, my kids moved to one of the cities who didn't want to transfer a road and wanted to know why their road isn't brought up to speed, but yet all the roads in that particular city are in great shape. And so, this is one of the conversations that comes up. So it seems as though that I think we really owe our responsibility as DTD, because you all serve the unincorporated areas, right? And I know we partner with the city, so this is not adversarial by any means, but it seems to me that at least planning or trying to push some of these funds towards those local needs a little bit more, knowing that, it's not going to go away. That call will just resurface again, right? And those painful memories, which, by the way, because of where I live, I probably hear more of it than anyone else does here on the commission. That's typically been the way it's been, and probably ain't going to stop.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner. I think just to kind of recap, first of all, you guys did a great job. I think that the Strategic Investment Fund expenditures, I see that really, looking back at 2019, the Board of Commissioners approved that first ever countywide vehicle registration fee, $30, effective January 2020. It generates $11.5 million, 60% for the county, 40% for the cities. And when I look at the projects you guys have identified and worked with the cities, I think they're all worthwhile projects. I commend you guys for that hard work. And would continue to do great work with the cities, and I think that's just working hard on those relationships. A lot of times we can't do all the projects. As you see, that's not a lot of money when it comes to road projects, but every little bit helps. So I think with that being said, I'll turn to my colleagues. If they have no other questions, I'd sure entertain a motion to approve the plan.
Yeah. I'll move to approve the Strategic Investment Fund expenditures expected through June 2030 as presented in Attachment B.
And do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Right. So Commissioner Schrader's moved to approve the Strategic Investment Fund expenditures expected through June of 2030 as presented in Attachment B, and Commissioner West has seconded the motion. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for bringing this up, Commissioner Savas. I do think it needs to be looked at, but I think for the purposes today, we need to move forward with it, because if it's going to be changed, it's going to take, as you said, IGA, so I'm not saying that this is a bad idea. I mean, I do think that's possible. I just think at this point in time, let's at least continue with what you've presented today, and then we can look at this and maybe take it up as an issue and a way to tweak in the future.
Great, thank you. Commissioner West, you had another comment?
Yeah, I remember and understand why this was controversial, and at the heart of it, I think that a lot of people in Oregon are just tired of being
Yeah.
taxed on every possible way they can think of being taxed, and it's never ending. And we pay a lot in gas tax. We pay a lot in other transportation to pay for the total transportation package. Now, Clackamas County, it is true, and it is just a reality. We don't have some of the same resources or abilities to raise funds like other counties do. Spoke to that a little bit today. And even though I inherently just don't, I can totally understand why people don't want to pay this additional cost or fee when they feel like they've been paying for a lot of different transportation costs and infrastructure. I get that, and then they kind of see like, where's my money going? I totally understand that. And then there's like the day-to-day practical realities of governing and having the resources necessary for maintaining what we have and a large amount of roads we have. So I just want to remember that, maybe it's an imperfect solution based on the realities here in Oregon. And I'm going to support this today, but I also can still very acutely remember why it gave a lot of people heartburn. And I think some of that, not because the dollar figure is huge, that for registration, I think a lot of that is principally based and how people want to see more for their money. Now, I am proud to announce it looks like Clackamas County is delivering more for their money, which is what we try to do here. And that's rare in government. And I just want to acknowledge like why there was a lot of angst around this. I remember that clearly as a new elected. Not everybody agreed with my support of this early on. It felt like though that one of those ways that you make a decision as a local leader, like it's not perfect, but you have to move forward. And I'm glad that we've done the best with it that we could and been good stewards of it. So I'll be supporting this today.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner West. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so I want to make sure when I cast my vote here today, you all understand what I'm voting against. And that is, I'm not voting against the vehicle registration fee. I'm just voting against that. Somewhere, I got to take a stand here and say there's a fairness issue that's growing here as we near the end of the road transfer aspect and the purpose and intent of this. So I'd be remiss if I supported this with the same old. And I'm not saying that we change anything, but lack of any direction to, consider that or come back with a plan of transitioning. By the way, when is your next time back for us? 5 years, 2 years?
We were just talking about that coming over. We think we kind of owe you an update as we move forward into the development of the TSP, but also a dialogue about the good work that's going on right now. So we'll probably be engaging in a discussion with this board sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
This is only part of the story, and I want to go back and I guess just to speak to Commissioner West's comments about, there was concern back then, but one of the biggest issues that we heard is that everybody else was telling us what to do with our money. and not our money, but how to spend our money and how we got our money. And this is the only local source that we have that we prioritize Clackamas County values on the projects that we want to do. Doesn't have bikes attached to it all the time, doesn't have somebody else's values attached to it. We distribute it countywide, it goes urban, it goes rural, it goes everywhere. And that was one of the big positives regarding the local source. But yeah, we need to come back and have a discussion with you. In all honesty, getting to your point, I think it's going to be, this 5-year plan, look at those out years, there's questions. And so I think we've got to come back here in the next couple. In addition to the update about the community road fund, there also has to be a discussion around this probably going forward on those out years.
Well, you may not have been here earlier today, but I mean, I took a little bit of interest and a reminder earlier when we were talking about our retreat and the surveys, and Chair Roberts mentioned, I remember when potholes was the number one thing. I'll tell you, where I live, it is the number one thing, right? And still is today. So in a matter of fairness and a matter of trying to address what I'm trying to address here today, I'll be voting no, but I want to make it perfectly clear it's a fairness issue that needs to be resolved.
Okay.
Oh,
Commissioner
Commissioner West.
Commissioner West, I believe you're muted.
Sorry with my sound issues. I'll figure this out. Thank you. I think that's a really fair point. I guess Commissioner Savas, I want to volley a question over to you is, I know we talked about this earlier, like we have to see what's in the transportation package, but do you really do you think it's a good time to get to work to try to figure out that fairness issue? That in the future can maybe get you there to be supportive of this? You are kind of the resident, you know the most about this out of all the commissioners. You are somebody we rely on. And what's the next steps to kind of maybe, I guess, fix this? Do we have a plan?
Well, we don't have a plan, but I would, personally, I think I would like, as I kind of mentioned as a C4 that he didn't mention it here today, if we mathematically, as we look at the expiration of the opportunities of road transfers in the county, mathematically reduce that percentage, that contribution of that 10% to whatever it is. Maybe it's 6%, maybe it's 7%, but at least, targeting 5 maybe. But, there's got to be some equity in there. There's got to be fairness, right? So absent support for a staff direction to do something or bring something back, I'll be, I won't say squawking, I'm going to do what I do, but I just can't in good conscience tell the people that it's literally, if not once a week, twice a week, it happens all the time. Matter of fact, I have a phone call to return. This is going to be the very issue. And I actually waited to return this phone call until after this session. So I'll be doing that probably tomorrow, returning a call on this very topic. So a lot of people, there's been years of issues where, some of the cities say the county, that they're subsidizing the unincorporated areas, and really it's the opposite, at least where I live. And this is a case where I can literally say that the unincorporated areas in this particular instance, are actually subsidizing the cities at their detriment. That's the unfairness aspect of it.
All right. We've had a lot of discussion on this, and I think we're at the point to call a poll. Clerk, would you do that for us?
Commissioner Savas,
No.
Commissioner West. Commissioner
Aye.
West,
Yeah, I was thinking, aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right, Gary, are we still kind of on track to take a short recess here?
Take a short recess to reset the room, and then next will be your budget committee.
All right, so we'll take a short 15 minutes recess.
10 minutes, perhaps?
Okay,
10
10 sounds good to me.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to move down there.